show of hands, how many of you have been here before? Okay, that's unusual. Thank you, Marty, for showing me that you've been here before. The staff remembers they've been here all day. All right, how many of you have been here before? And how many of you have been here in the last 2 years? Wow, that's very, very high. And that's really exciting, and it points to why we're having this evening. That's not true in every one of these conversations that we have. So it's good. I always like to sort of start with that just to see where we're at. By way of introduction, I thought perhaps it might be helpful to just quickly sort of ground ourselves in the values of this organization. First is the real reason why tonight came to be here. And that is the number one value for this organization is that art has the power to change lives. And what I love about that is that right up front, change is the first thing that we're striving for. Second, our actions are guided by trust, integrity, respect, and accountability. Third is some blah blah about high standards of excellence. Fourth, really important this evening, we cultivate mutually beneficial partnerships. Fifth, we seek to be inclusive of diverse communities, cultures, and ideas. And sixth, we support and bring recognition to the artists in our region. And that really underpins the invitation for tonight, as well as the invitation that we'd like to extend for you to come back again this weekend. That last value, this weekend your Pride wristband gets you in free. To be one of the first to see a new exhibition opening this weekend on all of the floors. The reason why we're not open to you this evening is because there's nothing on the walls. But it will all be beautiful by this weekend. We are celebrating work that has been made by the leading creative minds of artists of this region, and that will open. It's our biennial, and that runs starting again this weekend. But it is the work of the artists Dana Harrison and Fate, who this April painted the I Am a Man mural at the corner of 8th and Bluff Streets, that was behind our sort of raising our hand and saying we would love to host this conversation. So my job is to ground us in a little bit of the background on that work. 53 years ago in April of 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his prophetic "I have been to the mountaintop" speech. He called for unity and for peaceful action. Something is happening in our world, he said. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. Dr. King pleaded with his audience to carry forward his vision, and he reminded them of our shared humanity. The question is not, if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? So I wanted to ground us in the facts that led up to that speech and to the I Am a Man march that happened immediately thereafter, and which resonates so strongly today. On February 1st in 1968, Ethel Cole and Robert Walker, two Memphis sanitation workers, were accidentally crushed to death by the compactor of their garbage truck. Cole and Walker's deaths sparked a strike in the city's workers, who were struggling to survive poverty, wages, and unsafe working conditions. And despite King's efforts, events turned violent. Rioters looted stores, the police shot a 16-year-old and tear-gassed a church. On April 3rd, Dr. King delivered his I've Been to the Mountaintop speech. He called for unity and peaceful action. The choice, he said, was between nonviolence and non-existence. The next day, he was murdered. On April 8th, the I Am a Man march, originally scheduled in support of the sanitation workers, became a memorial for Dr. King. 42,000 people marched in total silence, carrying those signs that you see on that mural behind King's widow, Coretta Scott King. I acknowledge that the museum has a long way to go on our journey towards a more equitable future. I am excited to learn from you all tonight, from our panel, and to welcome you back again this weekend. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Corey Young from Key City Pride.
Oh, boy. Thank you and welcome. If you all know who I am, you all know that this is out of my realm of things I do, so thank you for all being here and for joining us on tonight. Normally my partner Rio is the talkative person, but tonight is my turn, so good luck. But thank you again for being here tonight and for coming to our first event of Pride Week 2021. We have a great cast of panelists who will be speaking from their hearts and from their experiences as being people who identify as LGBTQ in this community. And so I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second here, but before I do that, I have two volunteers who are here today. If you have any questions during the panel time, feel free to write it down on a piece of paper, and then they'll get it to us, and then we'll read the questions aloud. We have about 6 questions that we're going to answer to begin with, and then we'll answer you all's questions as we get them. But before we get into all that, happy Pride. This is Pride Month and King City Pride Week. And so this week we have a full schedule of Pride events happening right here in our hometown, Dubuque. Starting with tonight, the forum. On tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock p.m., doors open for Drag Queen Bingo over at 7 Hills. On Wednesday night, we're having our LGBTQ drag cruise at 6 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday. On Thursday is Pride Family Game Night at Back Pocket. On Friday night, we have for adults only, a bar crawl and glow party at First and Main. And then on Saturday is our really big day. We have our Pride Parade starting at 11 a.m. from Jackson Park all the way down here to Washington Park. And then at noon, we have our big Pride Festival with all-day entertainment, special guests from all the way from Texas and all around the Midwest area. And then on Sunday, we're going to take Pride to Galena for our last kickoff of our drag queen brunch. So that's a full week of activities we have planned for the community, and so hopefully you all will enjoy and join us past tonight and this week. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our panelists, starting with a person here on my right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Delano Kane Watson, and I am the owner of Eternal Massage and Body Care here in Dubuque. I'm a college student at the University of Dubuque. I'm a junior there. I'm a human health science major, and I'm excited to be here tonight and share about my experiences and answer any questions that anyone has.
Hello, I am Indigo Channing, and I am the local council facilitator for Achieving Maximum Potential. So that is a program for foster and adoptive teens, and the LGBT community tends to be in the foster care system more often, so there's a huge overlap with that. I also am the coordinator for the Dubuque LGBTQ Resource Network. So I basically am the one that goes through and makes sure that there's things like support groups in the community. We're currently working on a list of transgender affirming therapists in the community because that's been a real need. We have a list of hair people that are in the community. So different things like that. And I'm also a volunteer at the Multicultural Family Center, which is a city-run facility that has been super supportive for years.
Hello, my name is Sergio Perez, pronouns are he, him, his, and I work as our college's diversity officer at Loras College. So I am primarily working with different marginalized student groups, including our Black, Latinx, LGBTQI plus queer identifying, international, and also first generation college students. So outside of that, I am involved with our Iowa LULAC. I serve as our LULAC's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Chair. Happy to be here, thank you.
Thanks for sitting, Sergio. I didn't want to stand back up. Appreciate that. I'm Rick Fulmer. I'm a lieutenant at the Dubuque Police Department. I've lived in Dubuque now for 10 years. I'm also an instructor at Loras College. I teach intro to policing there, in addition to the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy and the Cedar Rapids Police Academy. Largely my focus is on change management, particularly around de-escalation and cultural change in policing. So be happy to take any questions on there. My husband Michael and I have 2 little dogs and 1 cat, so we stay quite busy.
Hi, I'm Annabelle Steffen, pronouns she, her, and usually go by Annie, so it's not that big a deal. Anyways, I am the mentoring coordinator for Mentor Dubuque at Hillcrest Family Services. So it's kind of a Big Brothers, Big Sisters sort of program. Really important to work with different youth from the community, but also just the community at large, not just the LGBTQ community, to support them and make sure that they have the resources that they need to live a better life. So Yeah, very happy to be here too.
Thank you. So again, I am Corey Young. I'm the co-founder of City Pride here in Dubuque. I also work as an advisor at UW-Platteville. So as my other full-time job besides Key City Pride stuff. So thank you all for being here, and then welcome once again. And so we're going to go into our first question here for the panel. How has being a member of the LGBTQ community impacted your life? And so I'll start at whoever wants to go first.
I think that being a member of the LGBTQ community has impacted my life because it made me become more aware of my health, honestly, more aware of my mental health, my physical health, sexual health, and any other thing that I have to take care of within my life. And it really pushes me to strive more, not only as a member of this community, but also as a member of the African American community. So it has helped me to honestly come out and be myself.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pinpoint how it's impacted my life, just because, like when you're immersed in it, it's just there. But thinking on it, I definitely have made a really intentional choice to be more authentic and to just really be open with who I am, as well as to just kind of be the adult that I needed when I was a kid. Because, like growing up in the 90s, I didn't see trans people. I didn't see, openly queer people, and grew up in a household where it was not safe to be LGBT. So, it definitely led to me just kind of being, real with who I am. And I did forget my pronouns. They are they, them, theirs. I am a member of the non-binary community. So I guess another way it impacts my life is, public restrooms are not fun. So.
That is a good question in terms of I don't know how best to answer it, but what comes to mind is I think being a queer gay man for me in my particular context of growing up in a Latino Mexican American home to a home that immigrated here from Mexico, and I think for me as a reflection, it's been a reevaluation, reconsideration of how I was raised. I was raised in the context of being, really rooted in machismo, in many ways a toxic level form of masculinity, that as I grow up and reflect as a gay man, I'm trying to think, okay, if I knew these things that I was raised in weren't helpful in me being my most authentic self, how is it that I could undo or at least remove some of those barriers for those who are younger and around me or look to me, unfortunately, as a role model. But those are the pieces that I'm always constantly thinking of am I making life a little easier, knowing that when I was young, I had all these questions, I have all these considerations that there's no one right way to be. And I think that's been probably the largest impact I'm able to share today as to how being a queer, being a member of the LGBTQI plus community has impacted my life.
When I got hired at the police department just over 10 years ago, I was at dinner with a group of friends, and somebody said, "How the hell do you expect to survive as a gay man at the Dubuque Police Department?" Survive, right? Not just hang on to your job. And so I thought, interesting question. I don't know. I didn't expect it, right? But it was the first time that it made me think that this might be a little challenging for me. And so I decided not to talk about it, not acknowledge that I was, dating a man, hide, go back into the closet. That lasted for a short period of time, because then, once somebody finds out that you're living with a man, and dating a man and that sort of thing, it spreads like wildfire. So then you're having to come out over and over and over again. That was stressful, right? It just seemed like, that's not what I wanted to focus on. when I was at work, but it seemed like that was what everybody else was interested in. So, you know, I decided that instead of trying to hide this and, you know, not live in the shadows, you know, when I get off work, to acknowledge it, you know, and appreciate, you know, my husband and you know, just the growth that we've experienced at the police department in terms the cultural growth. You know, when I decided to come out, and I really don't think that the person who asked the question understood the gravity of it. And you know, I'm happy to say that they've eaten their words since then. You know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And similar for me, actually, I was in a line of work that it was not okay to be trans. I was formerly a Catholic seminarian. So like Indy, I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. So it was very much, you know, you don't have any representation. I knew because we had the internet, I knew what transgender was. I knew I was it, but there was no healthy representation really out there. And being raised in a very conservative Catholic family, that's not what you do anyway. So I'm like, okay, fine. Well, you know, I'll sacrifice whatever so that, you know, they'll make God happy, sort of thing. Did not work. Eventually, like, different things came up, and the Lord thankfully called me away before being ordained, which was very, very grateful, and then asked me, called me by my name proper, and it was finally time for me to then come out. Lost a few friends, a lot of, seminarians from all over, and some different priest friends, but, you know, there's always been kind of a new family that has been created, and very, very grateful for that.
What is one message you would give young people of the community? What is one message you would give young people in the community trying to find their way? So what message you would give young folks who identify as LGBTQIA+, who are trying to find their way in the community?
Being a person of the young community myself, I would say really to just be yourself. I think that's the easiest way to put it, and it seems very simple, but also very hard. It's not easy for me to even be myself today, and I've come out a couple years ago. I feel comfortable in myself, but being comfortable around other people is something that I'm still working on. But I feel like in being yourself, you're able to, one, be yourself, and also not hide who you are, and I feel like it opens you up to being a better person to others as well when you're living in your true authentic self.
As somebody that works with young people, a lot of what I try to affirm is just that there are safe adults out there, is that there is community out there, and that even though we've still got a long ways to go as a society, it's getting better. You know, that's pretty much it.
Again, my context is mostly with college-age students who are coming to our space the first time. For many of them, without their parents or family kind of looking over them, watching everything that they might be doing. So in many opportunities, they get to reinvent themselves. So I always share with our students, find your one person who you can have confidence that they're going to look out for your interests, someone who's going to be safe. I know as I reflect back to when I was growing up and figuring out and developing my courage, that I needed to have someone who I felt safe and secure with. Without that, I couldn't have anything else. I wouldn't have the liberty, the freedom, the curiosity to go explore what the larger LGBT queer community could be. And you know, sometimes you see your community, you see the rainbow flags, and you're like, I'm not there yet to be out there publicly, visibly, and that's okay. Respect your own timeline, whatever that may be for yourself. But always have that one support that you know you can go to share your frustrations with, because in many opportunities, like mine, it was where I came out, and yes, family was disconnected. I didn't have a relationship with dad or siblings for X amount of time. And so I had other people step into those roles while my family caught up in their thinking, right? And so always, I would say if there's someone young who's out there, find that person who can step into that role as you need them.
This is tough. Can we start down here next time so we don't have to follow all of those? That'd be great. What I would say is, first of all, this is not a competition, right? Wherever you are, you're just fine. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. But I would follow up with acknowledge and appropriately respond to the way that you feel. We have empathy for other people, right? We recognize how other people feel, and we respond to their emotions, but rarely do we do that for ourselves. And I think that would be important if we had more empathy for ourselves, right? And spent some time with those emotions that we have, and not try to force change. There are no positive or negative emotions. They are what they are. And, just being okay with that.
Yep, just echo everybody. No, it's fine. Yeah, and I think, especially just say that there's support, and we love the young LGBTQ members. We really do want to support them and do everything we can. I was one of those that it's like, since I didn't have representation growing up, I'm going to be as much representation as I possibly can be, whether that's just wearing some trans sneakers like all the time. So just doing those sorts of things to make sure that people know that I'm out, and if people want to come up and talk to me, that's okay.
Surprise, I'm back this way. All right, next question. Thank you all for your answers, by the way. What challenges has there been being a member of this community? On the flip side, what have been some of your biggest joys being in this community? So challenges and then biggest joys.
All right, challenges. Oh boy. There's been a few, losing friends and stuff like that, and just there's always the risk of coming out, of how well you're going to be received, basically. But the joys are definitely outweigh it. Even the joys of being oneself, and to watch your depression medication go down and all your other medications go down, because it's like, oh wow, surprise! Actually, being me feels really good. So yeah, there's really a lot of the joy that comes with that too.
Yeah, I would say the list of challenges are long, but the joy does overwhelm them. For me, the challenging part is coming out day after day. That's tough. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to have this conversation again. Perhaps I don't trust the person enough to tell them, this side of my story. I don't want to be vulnerable at times, and I think that's the challenging part, is to overcome that vulnerability that you have. But the joy, meeting, people like this and events like this, and people that care, right? When you surround yourself with like-minded people where you can feel comfortable and be yourself, and you don't have to compete or prove anything or be somebody different. I think that brings the most joy.
So I would share, I think the difficult pieces of being me in this community, I think it depends. So for myself, I see myself as a gay man, but also I am a Mexican man. And so there are spaces where I could be surrounded by fellow Latinos, and it's like, phew, I understand that I will be protected from certain levels of racism. And then before you know it, I'm surprised by homophobia that might show up in my own community. And then when I'm in a queer LGBT community, I feel that part of me be at ease. But then racism decides to show up there. So sometimes I'm in this middle space of I find myself going to different communities to sustain that specific part of me. I actually was in Mexico City just a little bit over a month ago, and I purposely went to Mexico City where I knew I was going to be in the gay neighborhood there. And I tell folks, like, that was like my perfect home. I was surrounded by gay Mexicans, and it was so restorative because I was like, I don't have to worry about racism because, you know, we're all the same, and I don't have to worry about homophobia either. And so I think that's the difficult pieces is that sometimes I don't know if the spaces I'm entering, while can be safe and restorative for some aspects of who I am, it could also be very harmful for the others. Now, when it comes to the joy, I think there is something special and awesome about being queer in places like Dubuque, Iowa, because there's a shared experience that kids from the cities will never have like ours. And I think there's a level of resilience and grit of knowing that, like, yeah, I'm on Tinder trying to date and I ran out of gay men that I could potentially be with. And I say that because that literally happened to me last night. But no one else can connect to that. So that is my joy. I laugh at that.
I was thinking about the dating community here too. Oh gosh. Yeah, I guess challenges. One of the challenges, like, related to that is actually because I provide, like, supportive services and, like, quote, therapeutic services. I'm not a therapist. Dating is a little bit difficult for me because if I am in a relationship with somebody and it ends badly, that can effectively cut them off from a lot of support and resources. So I tend to not date very much for various reasons. But similar to what Annie was talking about earlier with growing up Christian, I grew up, probably like the biggest thing that impacted me for years and years is I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and like grew up with the whole, like, you know, like I did not come out until I was in my mid-20s, and grew up with the teaching that, you know, homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. So, like, just having that message kind of drilled into me, like, really impacted, like, my self-worth and, like, my relationship with my higher power for quite a while. And it still impacts it. Like, you know, like, churches are still, like, an unsafe thing for me overall. There's still kind of a disconnect there. Other than that, I would say it is expensive being a member of the transgender community. If you are going through hormone replacement therapy, or any sort of affirmational therapy, insurance, you know, like, it only covers so much. I probably spend hundreds of dollars a month between going to Iowa City, paying for prescriptions, all of that, and I don't make that much. I work in human services. Other than that, just the fact that, you know, my entire existence, you know, and I'm saying this as, like, a white trans person, you know, like, those of us who have other, like, identities, like, they'll get this on several levels, but my entire existence is politicized as far as being a member of the trans and the LGBTQ community. So, you know, like, I was at I'm in recovery from drug stuff, and I was at a thing, and I had somebody harass me for using the bathroom, and I was like, hey, like, you know, because I was using the gender-neutral restroom, and they're, you know, like, they were like, that's the men's room, you know, giving me grief about it. And when I went to one of the key holders is like, well, that's an outside issue. And I'm like, dude, I am not an outside issue. Like, I am receiving services here. Like, what? But, like, that is usually the response that's given anytime that we bring up our needs. As far as the joy, just some of the community that I found here and within the LGBTQ community, I have some really, really, really good friends that I would not have had otherwise, just because you kind of have that trauma bonding that happens with that. But, right? That's what it is. It's trauma bonding. Being rural queers, like, it's a thing. And just, again, just the time that we're alive in, I think. Like, you know, like, if I'd have been born, like, 20 years earlier, you know, my life would have looked a lot different. So just, like, you know, like, a joy for me is just that I'm in a time where, like, we're seeing these things being taught, and we're seeing these things starting to be discussed openly, and where, you know, like, even though there's still, like, safety risk, like, I can overall, like, be safe and, like, walk down the street. I just want my pronouns to get right now. That's, like, my next thing.
I would say, honestly, the biggest challenge for me is losing the connection with my own family. And I think that that's probably one of the shared challenges between all of us on this panel. And just in general, I lost my mother at the age of 6, and my biological father hasn't been in my life, hasn't been as present as I would say he should have been in my life. And so there's always been that disconnect of family and where do I belong? How do I fit in? How do I become myself? How do I get help? Where is help? And I think that growing up on the east side of Chicago probably didn't help that at all either. But coming to Dubuque was probably one of the biggest joys of my life. And it really pushed me to open up and become myself. This is where I started my business. This is where I became a member of Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, one of the, I think, one of the most welcoming communities that I am a part of here in Dubuque. And I feel like it really gave me a sense of belonging. And it helped me to kind of mend some of the brokenness in my life and start to say, hey, I'm 20 years old. I'm now in control of my life and no longer under the pressures of my homophobic family.
Thank you. All right, the next question. Sorry, notes there. How has the current climate, be it political or social, affected your life as a member of this community? I think I'll start off with that one. Exhausting is the word I would use. We started off this year, last year, with COVID. And so I think the panel will agree that as young LGBTQ folks, we love social interaction. And so once COVID struck, that was difficult for us because we couldn't do what we normally do. We couldn't enjoy our family and friends and our social circles. And so that was impactful. And then during COVID, we had George Floyd and we had Breonna Taylor and we had all these other issues and incidents. And then we had what's happening in Washington, D.C. happen. As a nonprofit founder, I can't really go too far, but some things happened politically that wasn't really safe for people who identify as LGBTQ, especially people who identify as trans. And so it's been exhausting, but hopefully we are moving in a direction that looks a little bit brighter, and so hopefully we can move further in that direction. But I'll go ahead and let the rest of the panel take it away.
I think that it has affected me politically and socially. It kind of going off of what Corey said about being a very social person. I'm a very talkative person. I love people. I love interaction, human interaction. It really, I think it kind of heightened the disconnect from my family in a way, socially, in that I feel like during this time of COVID and everything, about everyone being quarantined at home with family, I really had one person in my corner throughout the entire time. So that really gave me bonding time, but it also pushed me to be more present politically, I feel, and really form my political opinion. I voted for, in my first election, this past presidential election. That was my first presidential election. So it really got me thinking about, who's really caring for these communities that are disproportionately affected, whether that's mentally, physically, emotionally. And it really, I think, just opened me up to become more thoughtful.
Yeah. Socially, for me, like the current political climate or the current social climate, again, like times of COVID and like coming out, we're still not post-COVID. We're still in it, but like restrictions are kind of loosening up a little bit. As a support person, it was exhausting, just because people that were already struggling pretty much lost everything. So like adjusting, like several other people had to do, was doing stuff online, but also like intentionally reaching out to people because isolation was becoming more and more of a thing for people. As well as, managing my own mental health within all of that, because we're all like, again, like we talk about like that shared trauma stuff, like we've all like just survived a trauma and, like at a societal level. the flip side has been that since stuff's relaxing a little bit, like we've been starting up our smaller events, like the game nights at Back Pocket every like once a month. Like we just had that yesterday. Our support groups have been meeting in person again as well as online. Like we do a hybrid meeting now. And I guess that's one of the things too, like socially, like seeing the level of accessibility that's being afforded that came out from COVID. That used to be just called like, it used to be thought that like these levels of accessibility were not possible. And really it was just like, well, no, we could have done this all along. Like, why weren't we? Like, really. So like, even though COVID is, as I said, like kind of, cutting down a little bit, like we're still offering hybrid meetings because, not everybody can make it to an in-person meeting. Politically, exhausted, yes. It's that whole like, when you're a member of a marginalized population, you basically have to be politically active or you'll die. And again, like, in my case, like, I say this as a white person, and there's a lot of like racism in the LGBT community, like Sergio touched upon it. Like, we don't see that all the time with the white LGBT community. In my case, I think being trans, but again, like even the trans community, like that's not always a thing. So for whatever reason, I just happen to be fortunate enough to have it kind of like, instilled into me that I need to be politically active or, but not just for me, but for other people or with other people.
I would share, because of the nature of who I work with and the students I work with, everything I do is impacted by the sociocultural political climate, whether it's at the local, state, or the national level, quite actually in global as well. So I think exhaustive is probably the best word for it. And I say that as and I'm very human, and sometimes my anger gets the best of me. And if you see my social media, you'll see when I'm angry. But it's also a balance because I work in an educational setting in which there are students who I come across who absolutely disagree with me, and they have different lived experiences and have had different educational exposures that at that very moment may not understand why these issues, whether it's BOM, fighting for LGBTQ queer rights, women's rights, why that's such a big deal. They don't get the passion behind it. And so sometimes they see my passion, and then I get an email saying, hey, you shouldn't have said that. And I'm like, well, you know what? I can't be neutral on some of these very important issues. I don't have that luxury. And I can't separate my personal, who I am, from my professional delivery. You knew who you hired. And so I would say it's exhaustive, but I would say it's also been a very exhaustive experience in terms of having these issues or dialogue opportunities with family when there's disagreements. Because I come from a family where two of my brothers work in law enforcement. So throughout the past year, when things are peaking, whether it was George Floyd, Brown, and Taylor, I'm having the same conversations I'm trying to have with students, but also with my siblings. Just a month or so ago, I'm having the conversation with my brothers about why we don't say certain gay slurs. And it's like, despite being a member and despite being a brother to them, we still don't understand. And so I think it's the exhaustive piece is that there's always that personal that's probably still going on, never fully addressed, while you're also dealing with what the world is delivering to you.
Yeah, it just seemed like, over the past year and a half, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, like something else happened and it was worse. And it's sort of like, you can't get away from it. The COVID lockdown happened, but we're still at work, and then we're asked to enforce mask ordinance, right? And on one hand, you everybody gets it and understands that we need to do this to protect each other. And then you'd have people saying this is a violation of my rights. And so we're having this argument day after day after day. And then we all watched as, George Floyd was murdered. And, then, okay, let's go back to the drawing. We still have work to do. I mean, all the work that we do, we know is a moving target. We're never finished with the work that we do. And even though this happened in Minneapolis, we took a hard look at, our policies here in Dubuque, and the chief, made some changes in there. And so that came with training. The governor signed some bills into law requiring de-escalation training and that sort of thing, which was fine with us. We'd been doing that for several years up to that point, but now we have to double down and do that. Then we see the insurrection at the Capitol, and working in city government, you could imagine the anxiety, right, that everybody's experiencing. And so so when I can't remember who said it was just exhausting. It really has been exhausting, because imagine working with 99 people who have opposite political views that you do, right? And sometimes you have to dig your heels in and be the voice of reason when you hear these things. You know what I mean? It's true. You can't stop. You have to be yourself. I mean, there are people depending on you to speak up, right? When the majority in that environment says something. So that's been interesting, being the one to say, yeah, but think about it, or ouch, you can't say things like that. I mean, come on. Can we look at it from a different perspective? And just on a side note, I got promoted to lieutenant, so I have a little bit more reach and a little bit more authority, so they have to listen to me at times.
Awesome. So yes, it has been exhausting, but I'll also put out another adjective: infuriating. Especially for me, coming from a very Catholic background, someone who firmly believes ho theos en he agape, that God is love. And yes, I can do it in the Greek. It's fun. It's really fun. I studied Hebrew and Latin too. It's all fun. But yeah, just to see, especially the bastardization of it, and that's not even taking it lightly, the hypocrisy around a lot of Christian leaders that just basically just threw all of Christianity to the wayside to follow a political ideology. And that's been really hard to take, especially as somebody who really loves the church. And that's, I promise you, it's something more that's in the United States than other places. I got to study, thankfully, in Rome, and I got to see the church being accepting and loving in other places, and it was like, oh, good. It's just us. It's just the USCCP. It's great. But yeah, and then being more politically active, with all the trans sports things and everything like that, making sure to have a voice and doing a talk with the TH about that. Little small anecdote. When I was still pre-transition, all of that, still in high school, I went to Cuba City, and we would have like the guys that would weightlift and play football, they would scrimmage the varsity girls, and we got our butts kicked because the varsity girls were that much better than us. And it's like, it doesn't really, this whole men in sports, like the actual men were getting beat by the girls because they're just that much better than us. So they have the talent will always rise to the top. It's not like this whole one is just gonna dominate. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. So yeah, it's just been kind of frustrating year. Thankfully, I moved out of some people that were a little bit more conservative, but yeah, having those conversations with family members too, when they post memes on Facebook, and you're like, hey, when you say, oh, we know which bathroom to use, do you know what that means? Do you know what you're actually trying to say? And these are people that say they support you, but then they post things like that, and it's like, you guys, you gotta hold an even keel throughout. You gotta back up what you say. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right. As I speak right now, the mayor of Dubuque is putting pen to paper, and right now, June 21st to June 27th is officially Key City Pride Week. So can we give a round of applause for that? All right. So now we're going to go into some audience questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and you'll get some paper for you. The first question says, minutes ago, the first active NFL player came out. He talked about how hard that was. How do we have empathy for those who are still on their journey towards accepting and valuing us as who we are? Who wants to start?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's also one of those things where you can only come out when it's safe to come out. So you got to be working. I think it's kind of all of our jobs then to work to create that safe community to make it so that everybody feels comfortable, that everybody feels safe doing so. Yeah. Also proud former football player from Cuba City High School.
I can't say it any better than that. Just make the space available, you know, watch what you say, words matter, right? My background is in communications, and one thing that is true is that everything speaks, right? What you say, what you do, you know, the conversations that you think are, you know, not overheard by people are overheard, right? And so young people absorb all of that, and you know, everything speaks. And so is the message that they're receiving the one that we intended for them to receive? That's the question.
So you know, what comes to my mind is how exciting, and you know, cool to see that courage to share that part of themselves with us in such a public way. I would say be prepared to be a role model, whether or not you wanted it to be, and so you're going to be scrutinized for all the things you do that are pro-LGBT and for all the things you don't do. And I think I would say, you know, for folks who are finding inspiration in that, once you get to that point that you're able to come out and share who you are, being mindful that comes with a platform, and there is some responsibility to that in terms of being now the person you needed when you were younger, and so that's what comes to my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. But going back to the idea of the platform, I think that at a certain point after you do come out, I feel like then you're opening up a can of worms in a very positive way. I know that when I came out, I was scared. I was kind of marginalized by my family even more than I already was for being different. But I think that one thing that it helped me to do was become more myself, and I think it helped other people to become their self as well, because I overlooked what my family thought and overlooked what the community thought, and helped other people, and kind of reached out to more individuals at my high school at the time. I was a student at Hempstead High School here in Dubuque at the time. And just being the person that someone can come to, and I think that means a lot to someone who is lost or confused as to where to get help.
Thank you so much. All right, a few more questions from the audience, and panelists, feel free to answer or not answer as we go along, because we have some questions, and yeah, if you have something to say, definitely feel free to answer them. All right. What resources would you point cis, white, non-marginalized persons to educate ourselves so we don't exhaust LGBTQ friends with questions about how to be an advocate? So again, what resources would you point cis, white, non-marginalized persons to educate ourselves so we don't exhaust our LGBTQ plus friends with questions about how to be an advocate?
Yeah, my big thing is, again, like I am the coordinator for the Dubuque LGBTQ Resource Network. My big thing is, you know, follow us on Facebook. We have a page. Like, I specifically carve time out of my week to provide that resource so that people don't generally have to, and like collaborate with other community members to make sure that we're getting several voices on board. Also, like follow organizations like Key City Pride and follow organizations like the Multicultural Family Center on Facebook or on other social media platforms because they oftentimes offer trainings. Otherwise, I would say, again, like we're in a real, again, like talking about that, like what a time to be alive. Social media can be awesome. Look for like those who are LGBTQ advocates and educators on different platforms and follow them. Become a Patreon. Pay them. Pay us, please. We do a lot of this as volunteer hours, and it's exhausting. Like we do above and beyond. If you are asking us, hey, here's some money if you have the attention, if you have the energy to do this. Otherwise, like I said, just really take advantage of social media and the local resources that we have in organizations because there is a world of information out there, and if you can follow different figures, of course I'm blanking on particular ones to follow right now, but I'll try to post them on the page later, but just because there's ones that are really good as far as having particular information for different groups. And make sure that you're not having just LGBT people that you're following on social media, but make sure that they're from different cultures and communities as well, because it is not a universal experience.
I would share, I think in the quest to become perfect allies, advocates, accomplices, whatever language you want to use, there is always a drive to go at the national level, and often if you forget the local or state level where that's where your neighborhood queer person and their issues are existing. So always be mindful that while the national stuff absolutely needs attention, there's things that are happening here in the local community, here at the state level, that needs to be addressed, supported, advocated for as well. Now, a couple organizations that come to mind, Iowa Safe Schools, One Iowa, just Google them. The social media piece. If your social media feed looks like you need to diversify it. And there's literally organizations, education pages, fantastic individuals who have willingly put themselves out there as if you want to know about what it's like to be, you name it, follow my account. They're doing that, and some do it for free. Others are absolutely asking, yeah, you're going to pitch in if you want to learn from me, and which you should absolutely do. And I would say, be involved in the community too. Again, I don't know how political I can be, but Iowa just, has banned critical race theory. All these, fundamental vehicles of education that absolutely spill over into queer advocacy. And if we want to have an honest curriculum or education, it needs to be addressed from the early years. There's a reason why we are still trying to figure out what acronym we should use, because we weren't taught that at any point in our lives, and we're adults, and if we're going to have an end to this, cyclical oppression, we've got to change something. And so getting involved in the local state level is huge for helping queer people.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something that Indy said, in that, the experience isn't universal. So, diversify where you get your information. I mean, because if the conversation's not about intersectionality, then it's not you're not getting good information. The privilege is still real. And so I would say just make sure that you're looking at it from many different angles, not just from a gay man's perspective or a gay white man's perspective, that sort of thing, because it's totally different. And so Google it. I think one of the most frustrating things is when, it's there. You just have to do a little bit of research. It's super easy to find the information.
To piggyback off of that, though, be careful what comes up on Google. Especially if you put in anything transgender right now, it's going to be so I was on Facebook and a Fox News, we hate transgenders came up, and it was, the reason the ad was targeted to me was because I care about trans issues. And I'm like, what the, Anyway, just the way it goes. So yeah, just be careful. There are even people in the community that are not very supportive of the rest of the community. Yeah, so usually trying to find what, don't Facebook stalk everybody, but like what they follow, what queer people that you know follow can be really helpful that way too.
Could I add just one thing? Your questions, if you do want to ask somebody, I need to throw this out there.
Oh, yeah.
Keep it above the waist, out of the bedroom, I mean, that sort of thing. I mean, would you ask a straight person those sort of things, right? I mean, the answer is no. So why would you ask that? You know what I mean? So enjoy some, have some couth about the conversation.
Yeah, and I actually did want to add a couple more things too. Annie being in the room as a resource, Hillcrest Family Services has a comprehensive adolescent pregnancy prevention program. Use them as a resource. Also, like advocating with the school board that we get comprehensive sexuality education in our schools. It's not only helpful for the LGBTQ community, but it's also helpful for preventing childhood sexual assault and like just making sure that our children are like as healthy and as safe as they can be, because it talks about things like boundaries and things like that. So really like helping to make sure that those things are taught in our public schools, because right now they're not. And we have we literally have an organization that will go into the schools for free, certified, and teach our like kindergartners to our 12th graders these resources. Advocating for these resources when they're here. We have an overabundance of nonprofits in town, and none of us are very well supported by the community at large. It's really discouraging when we try to put out information and events. Like, it's awesome to see this full, but like there's a lot of times that we'll put stuff out and like it'll be like crickets. The other thing is when you're an ally to any community, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. Challenge yourself, be uncomfortable, put yourself out there, and learn, practice the things that you're not good at. Like, learn what you're doing wrong.
Amen. All right, next question. If anti-LGBTQ laws have passed so far in 2021, how do you stay positive when we're seeing one of the worst years for the community, and we're only in the 6th month? So again, if anti-LGBTQ laws are being passed already in this year, how do we stay positive when we're seeing one of the worst years for the community? We're only in the first 6 months.
I just wanted to mention that thankfully in Iowa, there's actually, I think it's the chairperson, whoever does the chair in the House of Representatives basically said, these are all hate bills and they'll never make it to committee. It was the first time I've ever written a representative to thank them. But yes, I mean, and it's really great to see that it's just that even that one person can make that big of a difference. Just having common sense, basically, in governance. I know One Iowa and Iowa Safe Schools have done a lot of lobbying this year. It's one of those where it's the idea of it is what scares people. It's just like a scare tactic, like they did. I mean, to be fair, certain political parties, let's go with that, that's a nice way of putting it, have been using scare tactics like that to get their voting passed for many, many years. It's probably just going to continue. So, sorry, just wanted to put that out there.
And I think the most frustrating part is that, legislation that we see come up in Iowa looks exactly the same as Florida and Oklahoma and Texas and other things. It doesn't originate here. It's Foundation. Exactly, right? It's all, lobbyists, millions and millions of dollars going around to just vet, the information. It's written by super smart lawyers, and I said we'll give them some credit.
Yeah. I just like the eye roll in the front.
Yeah. It just looks the same in state by state, and that's the frustrating part. I think the most frustrating part is that it didn't originate here. It was just something that just sweeping across the country.
So how I stay positive, I take trips out to Mexico City. Yeah, I get out of here for a little bit and come back. I'm like, all right, let's go. No, I mean, I keep myself grounded with a small group of intimate friends, and that is who I need to kind of stay positive. I have students who I've worked with who are absolutely amazing in terms of what they're able to do, and I just reflect back of like, man, back when I was your age, I wasn't doing that at all. Or I didn't know about this thinker, or just their hopes are much larger than I can have it at sometimes. And so I think how I get through it is having a very good group of friends and queer people who I know I can be with, and that's not going to be an issue when I'm with them.
Yeah, definitely. For me, part of like actually maintaining any semblance of positivity has been having like a circle of safe and affirming people. As we collectively work to build a society that is better for all of us. That being said, I also have like escapism that I use because sometimes we need off time. Like that's part of the balance. So like I make sure to seek out affirming media and like resources. And that's not all of my media and resources because I'm still like learning and like exposing myself. But like I make sure that I intentionally build in like comforting, safe things. Other than that, we're really fortunate in that in Iowa is a very political state. But like that being said, like I still know that there are people out there who only vote in like the national level elections. And, if you're one of those people, like local stuff matters. Vote for the school board. Like learn about your school board stuff, learn about your conservation stuff, learn about those small level local elections, and don't just learn about them, but share that information. Because even if you know it, like you'd be surprised how many people don't know it. The national level stuff makes a difference. Like I don't discredit that, but it's the local level where we can have the most impact and where we like can affect the most people at our it builds up.
I would say the most important thing is honestly to not give up. As hard as it may be to keep going, I think that is the biggest thing that needs to happen is to keep going. And because if you give up, then that leads to another person giving up, and it leads to another person giving up, and the same cycle will continue to happen and continue to go on, and nothing will change.
Awesome, thank you. All right, the next question, we're almost done with questions so far, so I'm going to finish these and then wrap up so we won't get put out by Gary anytime soon here. So for those, this question, I'm ready for this one. For those who have moved to Dubuque, how is the LGBT community different from where you have moved from? How did you handle the change? I'll start this one. The result of what you see right here, right tonight, is how we handled the change, I can say. I'm from Chicago originally, so my idea of pride is a little bit different than Dubuque's idea of pride, and that's okay. But I made a decision, my partner and I made a decision, when we moved here, that we want to bring some of that same feeling to where we are now, because we call Dubuque home now. And so that was well received by a lot, and not so well received by some. But as local active people in the community, we felt that this community deserved big and a lot, and so being someone who could offer that, we decided to give that. So it's not been hard, not been easy, but it's been rewarding. So again, the question is, for those who are not from Dubuque, how is it different from where you came from, and how did you handle the change?
I'm originally from Chicago, but before living here in Dubuque, I lived in Denver, Colorado. So I would say, and I was from the Green Valley Ranch area, which is sort of like near the airport, in a very diverse neighborhood and community within the city. And where something like this was not something that you see on a daily basis. There were lots of opportunities and lots of resources in Denver, but they weren't accessible, and that's one thing that I'm thankful for Key City Pride and Corey and Rio's efforts in building that community and building that awareness and just being an outlet for connection and growth.
So also from Chicago, La Vita and Cicero. You know, I growing up there, I didn't have a gay community because there wasn't out. And so I learned about that community going back after graduate school. And for me, it is a bit of a change because I have two communities. There's a legendary gay bar in La Vita called La Cueva, and that has been a gay bar since who knows when, since my parents first migrated from Mexico. And so in that kind of a gay bar, for example, you'll hear a lot of the music that I grew up with from regional Mexico. So I find that to be a very unique space that I love Dubuque, but it's just not going to happen here. And then there's also the gay club scene, which I find the club floor and just that vibe to be very restorative. So I think for myself, sometimes not having that here can be tough. But I think that's when I come to appreciate when we do have queer functions like today, that I'm going to savor this and enjoy this as much as I can, because I know these are very special. It's not something I'm not going to take for granted as if I was back home, and do I need to go to La Cueva or to Boys Town or North Halsted? Or do I have to do that? I don't know. I could do it next weekend. Versus here, it's Pride Week. Okay, I'm going to be there because it means something more here. There's a million other gay Sergios probably in Chicago. I'm probably the only one here. So that presence means a little more and makes it much more special.
Yeah, so one of my teachers in high school said, go to school in an area that you think you'd want to live in. And so I went to school in Platteville. I spent a lot of time in Dubuque, and by way of Portland, Oregon, I came back to Dubuque, and really, there was always some allure about Dubuque, and something interesting about it. And as far as the community goes, there was a bar here, a gay bar here that they seem to come and go. And that was the other thing that was sort of interesting about Dubuque is there would always be these pop-up groups and events and things like that. There never seemed to be a critical mass of people to continue things going. And so, but I think there's been some momentum around what Corey and Rio have done, and I think that's a fantastic thing. The only issue that I see is that groups from the past, right? I don't know what the problem is. Recognition, validation. I mean, you have it. You work for it. We understand that. We're standing on your shoulders for sure. And so I think that issue with the critical mass and people getting together and not so much infighting. I think that's the work that we can do, right? But compared to Freeport, Illinois, where I'm from, we're in great shape.
All right, almost there. Could or would someone enlighten the audience the full history, I mean, got time for that, of the Stonewall riots and why we have Pride in the first place? The first thing I'll say is we searched the name Marsha P. Johnson. You want me to start there, but then I'll let the other folks chime in after that.
Yeah, and then Sylvia Rivera. And
Yeah. Good. So I intentionally wore the shirt tonight for a couple of reasons. One, the stories, you have to know the story. Two is I'm really appreciative that Rio and Corey invited me to be part of this panel representing the police department, because the first Pride event, right, was a riot, right? It was a parade. The officers thought they were doing their job, thought they were doing what they were supposed to be doing when they raided the bar. And, I think there is a huge lesson for us to remember when it comes to the authority that we have and how we use that and being able to challenge things that we know aren't right. And so I appreciate you guys allowing me to be, asking me to be part of that and acknowledging the conflicts that we've had, right, between the police and the community, and not just the gay community. I mean, Black Lives Matter has brought to light a lot of things over the past couple of years. So with that, you know, the mayor of New York last year, or 2 years ago, sorry, you know, publicly apologized for the way the police treated, you know, the goers of Stonewall, you know, 50 years ago. And since then, you know, police departments have been uninvited to participate in Pride events. And, you know, because we still need to work out some of those things, right? Like, it used to be punishable to wear women's clothing. Like, how ridiculous are some of the things that we would enforce? And I say we because, you know, I'm a member of the police department, you know, and so it's the work, huh?
Am I under arrest then?
No. No. But what I'm saying is, I mean, think about what we've had to overcome in dealing with that type of oppression. And so really thankful for including us in your conversations, because we have to work together on that. And that's another thing that I'm going to be here for the next 30 years because we're working on that, and we're not hiding from the fact that you know, we were wrong, right, in so many circumstances and instances, and so the work continues.
I would share, you know, be mindful of who we are here in the United States. There was a queer history before Stonewall as well, and there's queer lived experiences and identities with indigenous people, native people that were on this land that through colonization, imperialism, lost that appreciation of gender and sexual diversity. And I think that's on us to seek that knowledge out, because we know our curriculums in the public schools, at least, they're not going to deliver that for us. And so I encourage folks to check out, you know, different textbooks. There's a hashtag I always use, hashtag #ReadDiverseBooks, that focuses on the queer people's history of the United States, very similar to Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, and go from there, because there's plenty of things that occurred, not just in the United States, but in the Americas, that are absolutely having an impact as to how we're able or not able to show up today.
Yeah, and I think also recognizing, you know, like the month of June, like we just had Juneteenth the other day, and part of what we need to recognize with the LGBT civil rights movement is that it sprang out of the Black civil rights movement. So making sure that, again, we're recognizing, you know, the past from where we're coming from, when we're talking about the American level anyway, and like the recent history, like, you know, but also making sure that, because I know there was like a Stonewall movie that came out a couple years ago, but like it really centered the white narrative. Pride would not be here were it not for Black and Latinx women of color. So like really realizing that like it was not a white-centered movement, and a lot of times the resources and the educators tend to be, you know, like tend to look like me. So.
All right, and we're down to our last question here. And so, what is your best advice for those wanting to be a good ally? You could sum it up in a few words. What would be the best advice you can give to someone who wants to be an ally?
I would say just keep going. And just keep going and like keep doing work, keep being present in the community, keep seeking information, keep seeking knowledge, keep hosting events like this, keep collaborating with Key City Pride or wherever you live, and being present in the community.
Yeah, I just want to echo what I said earlier about be uncomfortable, like intentionally be uncomfortable. That being said, I also, you know, want to echo, like, give money. Give it, like, these things, like these events cost money. The resources that we have in the community cost money. So like donating to like organizations like Key City Pride, the Multicultural Family Center, Hillcrest, like making sure that we're really like, you know, like $10 makes a difference. Like it can make a difference. Asking your friends to donate time and resources, and money. Like again, like just straight up ask people. A lot of times, like, you know, like we just don't think about it because we think it's rude, but it's like, no, like specifically be like, hey, like I'm donating to this. Can you chip in some? People will do it. Not everybody, but some will. And I guess the final thing that I have is just do the work when we're not there. Because that's a big thing that doesn't always happen is that, like, you know, like, I know that, like, some people are like, oh, this, because I'll have some time where an ally will say, like, oh, this such and such thing happened. It's like, well, did you do anything? And it's like, well, no, I didn't. Well, you're not much of an ally if you don't. I have friends that, you know, like, again, like, my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I get misgendered on a daily basis. It is exhausting. But I have a few friends, and, like, some of my friends are just like, meh, it's whatever. But I have other friends who intentionally, like, when I am, like, getting misgendered, like, aggressively are like, Andy is a they, use the right pronouns. And I don't even know about it. I just know about it because somebody else brings it up. So, you know, like, just do the work.
Let's say, and that, and don't be lazy with the work. I can't tell you how often, because yes, you know, for us, we started with an acronym, and I do get a kick when we were called the Alphabet Mafia. But I would say let's not be lazy, because often, you know, as we develop and grow into who we are as individuals and as a community, we find better language that articulates what and who we are. And so when we introduce that language, embrace it. Don't give me the, oh, there's another letter to add. I'm like, get over it. Get over yourself. Honor the dignity that's trying to be, restored in the language that we're using. So just to echo all those pieces, but yeah, just do not be lazy.
And, you know, be there when we need you. You know, answer the phone and talk. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of hurt and pain. There's a lot of stuff going on, you know, that that people are experiencing. And so when somebody wants to talk, listen to understand how they feel, not to reply, right? Validate how your friends feel, right? Don't tell them they shouldn't feel that way or you shouldn't think that way, that sort of thing. You know, validation, I think, is probably the most important thing, is validate them as a human being at minimum.
Yep, and then I guess to echo, but also it's a thing that we're exhausted because of the social, political, and all of that, because it's our identities. You guys might not be as exhausted to stay in that fight longer. So sometimes it feels like we're the only ones fighting, and it's hard to see people out there. I'll also give the advice that we always give the mentors for how to be a good advocate for social justice. When you hear conversations going on about those people, being able to stand up and correct it. Whether that be, no, I have a transgender friend, they're not like that at all. The example I usually use is because Dubuque, no, my mentee is from downtown, they're not like that at all. You know, those sorts of things, just challenging. They're very simple, but they can challenge somebody to be like, well, that's not what I meant. And then it's like, oh, well, what did you mean? And have that conversation that way. Those tough conversations are very, very, very important.
Thank you. All right, can we give our panelists a round of applause, please? So, thanks again for coming out to our first day of official Pride Week. Really appreciate you all being here. Thanks to Gary and the museum for having us. Definitely check out the exhibit on the 26th. Like he said, if you go to Pride Fest, which I hope all of you all are going to next Saturday at noon, right after the parade. If you go to Pride Fest, your wristband does get you free access to the exhibit on next Saturday as well. And so we'll be around to mingle a little bit more until he kicks us out. But again, follow us on Facebook or our website, kcdpride.org, and see all of our Pride Week events. We have something going on for everyone all week. Most of our events are kid-friendly, so feel free to bring your sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, whatever they might be to you, bring them with you and celebrate Pride with us. Key City Pride was founded by 2 queer men of color. It's really important to us that we be a part of this I Am a Man exhibition. And so thank you to Gary and the museum for doing that. And so we really appreciate how we combine culture and arts and sexuality and make it this what it is today. So that flag you see up there, it has not only the traditional pride colors, but you see it also has the transgender colors and also the brown and black, because as they said, without people of color, especially queer people of color, there would be no pride. So again, thanks for being here, and please eat cookies and cupcakes, because if you don't, I have to, and I shouldn't. And so yeah, thanks for coming out, and thank you.